Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm Roger Kibbe.
and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Hey Roger, great to have you back on the show.
Great to be back, Alan. I always love conversations with you and Mark and listening to your amazing podcast. You are two of the most thoughtful voice and conversational AI leaders in the industry. So it's an honor
Thank
to
you.
be on your show, and it's amazing to listen to you guys talk as well.
Thank you. We appreciate that a lot. We have known each other now for almost for over 4 years. And it's always great just to have the conversations in the hallway with you, to get your insights on stuff, to be able to chat offline, and especially to have you on here. So thank you again. But the specific reason we asked you this time is that there was a recent conference, the Unparsed Conference, that had a lot of talk about talking, as I like to talk, say it sometimes, talking about where conversation design and development with conversations or voice and other conversation systems are going. And we were kind of looking around. Neither Mark nor I attended this one, and Mark and I were kind of looking around for someone who would be willing to talk about it. And it turns out you led the developer track on that. You were the MC for that. So
Right.
you had a great insight as to what developers were talking about at the Unparsed conference. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about the conference and about your role in it, and then we can start to talk about what some of the big themes were, or some of the things that jumped out at you were.
Sure. Yeah. So the Unparsed Conference started by well-known Kame Sins and Tom Hewitson, two really great conversational AI leaders.
I was going to say
This
also leaders in this industry. So
complete leaders in this industry. This was the second annual one. They started it last year. It was focused on conversational design. And what was new this year is to expand and say, hey, let's get the developers involved too, and have a conference for developers and conversational designers, and have some interspersing of people going across, right? Because I think if anything, the new technology that we're seeing is kind of blending those roles together in a lot of ways. So
yes.
it was about 300 people, so nice kind of smaller conference. I go to a lot of conferences that are thousands of people, and the nice thing about 300 people is you get to meet, you feel like you met a significant portion of the people in the conference, right?
Hmm.
And I always say I go to conferences, of course, to listen to the talks, but even more importantly is the side hallway conversations, or getting to know someone who you've known for a long time, social media, and actually talk to them. And it was in London, which was great because of the European crowd, right? It was much more focused on Europe. And I think sometimes, big conferences here are very US centric. And then I hear a lot of European thought leadership, but I don't always get to sit in the same room with them. So that was
Uh-huh.
pretty cool and amazing. And it was in London, one of my favorite cities in the world. So not too bad in London with good weather. So
Wow,
we
that's
enjoyed.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So all good. It was a great conference. 3 days. Started with a hackathon, and then 2 days of presentations there. And I came away with lots of new thoughts, and lots of new people to keep in contact with.
And I would definitely agree with you. One of the things I say about all the conferences I attend is that it's about the people. It's about the people you meet. It's about the presentations and being able to go up to the presenter afterwards and say, I really liked what you said here. Can you elaborate on this? What do you think about this in light of what you said? You know, I couldn't get into it in the 30-second question, but let's now go to lunch and have a 30-minute conversation.
Totally,
You know,
100%. I mean, that's so much of the value there. So I imagine kind of like, if I could summarize the themes that it kind of came out. One, and I'm sure we can dive into some of these. One was certainly everyone is wrestling with LLMs, right?
uh-huh.
Particularly output, right? Everything that gets all the hype is the generation side. And yet, everyone, when you actually go down and you're actually building apps and releasing them, and not just creating cute demos and things, you're like, wow, that stochastic nature of it and lack of determinism is truly a challenge, because I'm not sure what this thing is going to say, and is that going to
Yeah.
be okay? And if I'm a bank, for instance, or a medical provider, I mean, that's really important what it says. And for any business, like maintaining its reputation is clearly true. So a lot of talk about um, kind of corralling that, right, and what to. And then the other side, which I've often believed, is although all the hype with LLMs is on the generative side, right? Gen AI. I'm not sure I love that term. A lot of the value is on the understanding side. Is this
Yes.
kind of broke? I mean, you and I have been in conversational AI for a long time. And one of the biggest challenges is always been, arguably the biggest challenge, is getting the darn devices to understand us, or the system to understand what we're saying, right? On the old NLU systems, we train them, 10, 20, 30 phrases, right? And then, of course, you'd launch it, and day one, someone would say something in a way it was unanticipated, and it would not work. And I think, to my mind, a lot of the challenges that we've seen with a lot of the voice assistants are really that they didn't understand people. It wasn't that the output that they could do was so bad. It
Right.
was
And by understand, we don't mean the speech to text part. We mean in the doing something with that text part, the intent handling.
absolutely, yes, the intent handling, extracting the slots there. So I mean, LLMs are really, I mean, there's a lot of discussion of using LLMs as essentially a classifier, right? And
Yeah.
so using the LLM to do intent detection and extract the slots and do that, which LLMs are actually quite good at doing. And a lot of people are, they have their existing fairly complicated NLU systems, and they're starting to say, hey, the real value that I can get out of this, because my NLU system is working pretty well, is to use the LLM as more of a classifier and a fallback. If I don't match an intent, instead of saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you, or etc., go to the LLM, and then here's the list of intents, LLM. Here's the slots I'm looking for. Can you act as a classifier and figure that out? And
Yeah.
that seems to work really well. And I think there was a lot of promising discussion around exactly that topic, which is kind of it's the underhyped, if there is anything
It
underhyped in Gen AI, kind of capability there. Which,
it really no,
yeah,
I agree. It really is. And I'm laughing a little bit because you haven't seen it yet because I haven't released this episode. But this was what Mark and I talked about last week as well. So folks watching us will have heard Mark and I talk about exactly that.
got it, got it.
Um, but I agree with you. It is very much underhyped. Um, and I feel also that even the LLM people that see it, that like it, that use it, don't fully get what they have on one hand. And on the other hand, there are so many lessons that we from the NLU voice space, the intent based, learned about what needed to be done and how we do this and how it should work and the features that we needed. They haven't learned those lessons yet.
Or they're relearning them, which is crazy,
Yeah.
right? Like we threw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I think
Yeah.
there's this tendency in the technology industry, when a new technology comes across that's innovative and new and can do things that previously weren't possible, to go, oh, we got to restart. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. For years, we sat there and thought about, okay, how do we get this system to understand things? How do we create output? How do we do all these things? Now, have been fighting with the technology to get it to do what we wanted, but the thinking that we had around how we wanted it to work was as absolutely as relevant today as it was in 2017, when we were figuring out what the heck to do with like Alexa, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
so, you can't, you got to take, I think there's the new kids on the block, right? Sometimes ignore the old grizzled veterans, but the old grizzled veterans are like, hey, cool new technology, but don't forget all the discussions and thoughts and thinking that we had there, because they're totally relevant today. And that just permeated the conference, because the conference really, it is heavily practitioner focused.
Uh-huh.
So almost everyone there is like, they got their hands dirty. They've launched these things. there was a couple very large European banks who have these chatbots that do hundreds of millions of messages, right? So like those are people you
Wow.
got to listen to those people, right? They got their hands are as dirty as dirt can get, right? Around what works, what doesn't work, what they've seen, right? And those were all NLU based, and now they're looking at LLMs and trying to adapt them. But yeah, it was nice to have a group of people, practitioners with dirty hands who've been in the industry for a while and realized that LLMs and Gen AI are amazing, but what we did before is also very valuable. And when you marry the very best solution, is to marry the thinking and even some of the capabilities we were building years ago with some of the emerging capabilities and go and figure out what the heck you do. I mean, people fall in love with the technology and you step back and go, okay, here's the business needs, here's the business value, here's the business challenges. Now, what's your tools in there, right? I mean, I made a
Yes.
point. I was recording something else the other day, and I'm like, I consider AI tools, I consider LLM just a tool. It's a hammer, but there's also wrenches. There are also screwdrivers. There's all these things, and your solution is going to be using all of these, right? I'm recording this from my garage. I look up, I can see tools of my thing, and I know that if I have the right tools, my job is going to be quick, easy, and well done. If I don't have the right tools, it's going to be a lot harder and probably lower quality. And so you got to consider these just as tools to get the job done.
Right. This is where I get to pull out the hammer that I have sitting next to
Ah,
my machine
yeah,
for no good reason, and say, if everything looks like a hammer, that's what you're going to use it for.
yep,
Um,
yep.
but you're absolutely right, and I guess some of the question is how much did that come out during the conversation at Unparsed, that this is just a tool, or maybe it's several tools, several types of tools. We've got sledgehammers and ball peen hammers, and we have these different types of hammers. How do we use them? How do we use them correctly? How much was that kind of discussed?
Yeah, and I think it was. That's such a succinct, good analogy, right? And things, and I think sometimes it gets clouded in a 20-minute conversation, and you're really saying that in two sentences there. But I think people who have been around in here long enough realize that they've seen a bunch of tools. Some work, some don't, and so there was some good discussion there of that. And then there was companies. So there was like Rosso was there, and I've never worked deeply with their tools, but I've always appreciated their thinking,
Uh huh.
which their tool really is a hybrid of NLU, and then it was an NLU tool, right, for chatbot creation, and then they integrated LLMs, but they did it more as a fallback, and now they're trying to incorporate that, but in not a oh wow this is amazing hyped like going to change the world way, but more of a oh we have another tool now, we have the hammer. We've been doing everything with wrenches and screwdrivers. Boy, the hammer is going to become darn useful and things for whatever we're building there. So I think there was good discussion there, and it was refreshing because you get on social media and it can be quite the opposite, right?
Right.
It's all
So
the hype train.
yeah, social media on the hype train is definitely the right way to put it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
but it was good to see that there was some cutting through that hype when you were talking about what people were doing. Um,
absolutely.
what were some of the other things that I guess kind of grabbed your attention about what people are doing?
Well, there was a really good presentation around detecting emotion
Hmm.
and right and things and using that. And then the question, it wasn't that, I mean, I think the technology to detect emotion in speech is actually pretty good. Not that a lot of people are using it there, but then what do you do with that? Right. So if
Hmm.
I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm sad and things, what the real question is, what do I do with it? Right. And so it depends on the use case, right? I could echo that back. If you're angry or frustrated, I could be sympathetic for certain use case. But if I'm a bank, you probably don't want your bank chatbot being sympathetic, right? You probably want it to be really practical and get things done. On the
Yeah.
other hand, if I'm some chatbot helping maybe with more mental health related issues or kind of a counselor, so to speak, then yeah, absolutely that kind of mirroring the emotion is really interesting. I thought it was a really interesting conversation because it was not that it couldn't be done. right? And it was interesting because they were taking basically two. So one AI to do the NLU and L like detect it,
Hmm.
and then secondly take the actual speech, right, and get the emotive kind of the emotive state of the user, and then combine them together. And then what do you do with it? And I don't think we came up with exact answers of exactly what to do because it seemed really use case specific. And yet I feel like, what's lacking now that maybe LLMs are much closer to solving a lot of the understanding challenges of the actual speech, we still don't have is all one or not what is the emotive qualities of the speech, right? And
Yeah.
my emotions, right now, right? I'm not only giving you some emotion, but you're also there's a bunch of what wasn't talked about, which I also think is really interesting and kind of the next frontier is all the body language things, right?
Right.
Truly
So
understanding human communication.
right. So many thoughts piling in there,
Sure.
but uh, so the first taking I want to focus on two. Um, the first one is this notion of, well, the fact you need to marry the two of them in some way, because if you just take the phrase "that's great," that's got several meanings. If I say it as, "Oh, that's great," that's a very positive. I'm reinforcing
Right.
that's wonderful. If I say it as, "Oh, that's great,"
Right.
that's much more negative, and you're not getting the sense of which one you're talking about unless you have the rest of that context.
100%.
Um, but the other thing that you said that I think was really that I people are struggling with. I see a lot of people don't get this yet. Is the fact that, okay, feed it through two models, feed it through two prompts.
Right.
One tool is good at this, the other tool is good at Y. Get the results of the two of them together, feed it into yet another prompt. You
Right.
don't need to do everything in one massive prompt.
100%. I mean, this is I'm going to go back to our tool analogy, right? I mean,
Okay,
if you're
go.
building something, you use a bunch of different tools. I might grab the hammer, I might grab the screwdriver, it might do. Now, this is it doesn't work perfectly, that analogy, because you're using them concurrently and things that might be less true with physical tools. But conceptually, you're absolutely right. Is like, I think this monolithic thing that's going to do everything is not necessarily and this is on the understanding side, do that. And then on the doing, right? I mean, what's all the agentic stuff is all about
Exactly. Yes.
doing multiple steps, right? And iterating through there and doing that and things like that, which is just, if you just step back, what's good software architecture, right? It's
Yeah.
well defined services, microservices, if you like, that do one thing and do it well and things there. And I think maybe we kind of got in the conversational AI space this idea, we kind of forgot that a little
Well,
bit.
I think some of it is that we are getting people who are not necessarily traditional coders.
Right.
Because, as traditional coders, we're thought of, take the problem, break it down into pieces, break it down into smaller pieces, keep breaking it down until you get the smallest thing that you can do
Right.
quickly and easily, and
Yep.
then put them all back together.
Yep.
And in AI, the kind of approach to prompt based generative AI has been ask the question, you'll get the answer.
Totally. It's kind of the
And
easy way out. And
right.
it's
And maybe you need to say as part of your question, let's think through this step by step,
mhm,
which, is kind of starting to say break things down. But I think
mhm.
if we actually just started breaking things down and treating each component separately, one feeding X to the next, maybe having decisions in there about which one should be called next, you know, iterating where necessary, you're starting to bring in very traditional computer science notions here, and I think that's valuable for people to start wrapping their heads around when you're doing AI programming, when you're doing agentic programming.
The funny thing, Ellen, is yes, go back to the old lessons learned. Just as we were talking about
Yes,
the old NLU lessons, this is just old software engineering lessons, right?
yes,
We've known this for a long, long time, right? And sometimes new technology gets, and we build these frameworks and things like that. And I might point my finger in the direction of a few of the very large voice assistants who tried to build these monolithic architectures to do everything for you. And that might have that kind of set the thinking back of the way we built applications and things like that. I mean, I built applications for all of them. And yeah, you got this kind of messy spaghetti kind of thing that didn't have good separation of concerns and that and things. And it's almost like we kind of lost all those smart architectural things that we've known for years was the right way to do it. It's all of a sudden the amnesia, new tech. Let's have amnesia about everything else we've learned in the past and try to rebuild something. And it's like that's not the right approach.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there was a hackathon at the start of Unparsed. Any anything? What were the neat things you saw there? I guess.
I think it was a one day, like 6 hours. So everybody was trying to build goofy chatbots and things like that that did interesting things. I don't know if I'd say anything jumped out. We built this silly goofy thing. It was three of us that took some input and then created a complaint. Okay, there's this. The British love to complain, right, and things like that. It's a stereotype, kind of true. And so we're having fun with it, and then we made it have different voices and things like that. So I wouldn't say there's anything in the hackathon that particularly jumped out. I mean, we tried to use some of the sponsors tools. We use VoiceFlow, which is really interesting. I hadn't used that tool in many years, and it was
Mm,
cool to see how far they'd gone. Some other people were using Raza, and I think the value might not have been what it was created as much as more as, oh, let's go use this tool and try to do this and see what the tool can and can't do. That's kind of the value there. Um, the other thing, if I could toot my own talk and
of course.
things like that. So I gave a talk that was primarily about fine tuning and kind of demystifying and kind of taking away. There's all this misconception about it, and people going, "Oh, it's fine tuning versus RAG," which couldn't be more
Oh.
untrue, right? RAG is about information. Let me give you the analogy I gave in my talk because I think this really resonated with people. I said it's a cooking analogy. So the base
I
LLM.
like cooking analogies.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, I
that's
like to
better than
cook.
hammer
Like me.
analogies.
So the base LLM is like going to cooking school. It learns a bunch of things. It learns a bunch of techniques. It learns how to do things, and then you get out in the real world, and using a recipe is RAG, right? Now you have an
Mm,
external information that's there for a recipe. And what fine tuning is learning a technique that you didn't learn in cooking school, right?
hmm.
A specialized cooking technique. And that's what people, I think there's a lot of misconception. I mean, fine tuning is really saying, hey, the base LLM can do A, B, and C, but now we're trying to make it do D, which tends to create very complicated prompts, right? I've certainly written those 2, 3, 4 page prompts, right? And you're really trying to teach it to do something a little bit different. And fine tuning is quite frankly, if I wanted to know, if you've done multi shot prompting, I would argue you've done fine tuning light because all fine
Mm,
tuning is essentially, and I'm boiling it down and making it a little simpler, is multi-shot prompting. Maybe you're giving a bunch of examples. Fine tuning, you may be going hundreds or even thousands of examples of what you want it to do. So that gets the LLM to actually understand, hey, if I have to do something like classify this text, right? Good fine tuning thing, right? Because that can have very business specific things. Here I have a ton of examples, and now I've started to understand how you want to classify text. So I get text in and I understand it. Or style copy. This is a big thing with if I'm using in marketing and that. I have a voice of the brand. I want my output from my LLM to sound like one of my marketers, right? Use that voice. So what do? I fine tune it with a bunch of examples of content that I've created, and now the LLM learns how to speak in that voice, so to speak. There's other examples, but I was trying to demystify the belief one that it's hard because it's not that hard. What's hard is getting the data and the QA.
yeah, I can. I feel like that's been probably my biggest barrier into just experimenting with fine tuning is saying, well, okay, what do I give it? Almost all of the ones I've seen basically say you set up an input and an output prompt examples
Uh
basically,
huh.
and I'm like, well, how do I find thousands of examples for what I want?
Yeah. So there's this idea called knowledge distillation, and that's taking a GPT-4o, a Gemini, a Claude, right? And that's saying, I'm going to actually get them to create a bunch of the data, and I'm going to train a Mistral 7B on it, or a Llama 3B 7B. And the whole idea there is cheaper, faster, and easier. It's a lot cheaper to run Mistral 7B than it is to, the inference costs are a small fraction of Gemini's inference costs.
It's cheaper to run Mistral 7B with a smaller worldview,
Yes.
but a worldview that you've partially extracted from that bigger
Yeah. So it's like the
set, I
teacher,
guess. Interesting.
you're
Okay.
both teacher and student. So the teacher, so this is, I'm building something use case specific, right? This isn't a general purpose job. I need something very use case specific where I have an LLM there. And for instance, this is a common use case. I got ChatGPT 4o to do it really well. And yet I am high volume. And so I look at those inference costs and I'm like, man, this is going to be really expensive to do. If I can use that, have it create a bunch of synthetic output and then train a much smaller LLM to mimic it, then it's much cheaper. And so this is a tool, and it's a technique that's starting to be more and more widely used because, although inference costs keep on coming down, I mean, what is, I don't know, Gemini, Chat GPT, $15 per million tokens or something in that range and things like that. I keep track of.
I think Gemini Flex is even cheaper. I'm pretty sure 4.0 is cheaper than that too. I,
But I mean, some of the like inference costs for like a Mistral or Llama, like a 7B model, can be like, 20 cents for a
yeah.
million tokens, right? So that's a big savings there. And so I think that's an interesting idea of, and it gets into, which is probably a whole nother conversation, into this whole edge embedded LLMs and how we make them capable and do that there. I have lots of thoughts and thinking around that, but
Yeah,
we
that
probably,
that definitely is is a subject for another time, which I'm excited to talk about, but
yeah.
another time. So what else? What else kind of stood out at you? That's an interesting. It sounds like a
Um,
really interesting topic. Anything else that kind of jumped
yeah,
out?
I mean, lots to talk about QA, right? Right? Like QA, how the heck do QA, you know,
Yeah. I,
stochastic output, right? And so, you know, I don't think anyone, this is like I always describe it as that's one of the fundamental mindset shifts and one of the biggest reasons why large enterprises um, are challenged with getting some of these Gen AI tools out the door, right? Makes a easiest technology I've maybe ever seen to create a demo, right? Especially if I use like a big helper uh,
yeah.
thing like LangChain on top of it, I can create this demo. Now I need to go to production. Now, and this might be controversial. I'd say LangChain starts getting in the way there as soon as something breaks. But anyway, I have a love-hate relationship with LangChain. Um, but but the other thing is, okay, I'm used to this very deterministic kind of QA. My build pipeline, everything goes through this. It must pass these QA tests and things. Now, non-deterministic stochastic output, what do I do? Right. And I think people are looking at other LLMs and doing that. What's interesting is there's a company, Radiant. I thought they're into a startup. And what they're trying to do is, they're looking for aberrant output. So they're looking for what happened. Like they're using an LLM to go, okay, we're starting to learn what the output looks like. That looks odd.
Hmm.
That looks like it should be. And so they flag it. So now you can go back and go, that seems different from everything else. Is that okay? Or is there something going on here that we need to address? And I thought that was pretty clever. But I still think there's the QA tools and that it's an emerging. I mean, there's like companies like Galileo that I know are doing interesting things there. They weren't there, but I still feel that's like kind of the wild, wild west. And one of the big impediments to holding back adoption is how do we do this QA? And it's not just a tool thing. It's also just, I always describe it. And I've talked to so many friends who aren't Gen AI, and they literally, their heads spin when they think about stochastic output. It's like,
I mean, even people in
what do I do?
even again, this goes back to, this is a case where we can't look at how traditionally we would develop things, because traditional development is deterministic. You know, we know
Yep.
that if we know if we put input X, we get output Y. We know that. That's what our traditional testing is found. That's the foundation of Q&A historically, and that's all upended in this.
Right.
One of the things I said at Voice and AI last year, when you're just we were just seeing everyone getting started. There was a lot of introduction to this, that, and the other thing. I think you and I had this conversation that what was missing was, how do we do Q&A? And I think I said, if we don't
Hmm.
see that by you know 2024, we were in trouble. So it's really good to hear that
Hmm.
we're at least trying. The question's been asked by more than just you and me, and
Yeah.
there are people out there asking the questions, trying something with the answer. Whether or not it's the right answer, we don't know yet, but trying something sounds like a good start.
And so what do we do? And yet we accept humanity giving variance in their answers. We also accept humanity making error. Humans hallucinate, right? We do. We
Yes.
forget things. We
Yeah.
make up. We tell tales. We do these things, right? And we've had these deterministic systems that are absolutely, like, if they're running well, very, same input, same output. That's not human. And now we have this system, right? This technology that's, albeit very different than humans, has that human quality of
Okay.
different output, making errors and things like that. And do we got to adapt our thinking around our systems to take a more humanistic approach? This is kind of crazy stuff to think about, but I thought it was really interesting to think
It,
about.
it is it is interesting, and I think my gut reaction to that is saying, well, okay, that's fine, but we used to be able to say that computer good because they could do something more accurately, faster, and cheaper than a human could. And now we're saying, well, we're willing to sacrifice a couple of those, maybe even all three of those. And that gets you saying, well, what's the point then?
You know what? Here's where I've thought a lot about this. I think there's a lot of, I think with deterministic systems, we wanted 100% solution,
Mm,
right? We want the output to be done. And that absolutely, and even, I mean, and if you're like a public chatbot and things like that, especially in something sensitive, you absolutely need that and things. But this is what drives me a little bit crazy. People like some of the criticisms of the AI coding tools, which you and I might disagree. I like them. I know you have your, but here's the way I look at it. If it gets 75% of the code right and 25% wrong, and things are some challenge. And I understand the kind of, I'm actually, as someone who's a pretty experienced developer, I got a head start, right? I look at it and I'm like, yeah, that looks good,
yeah.
right? That's good. Or this, I got to edit and things like that. So it's getting some of the job done, but not all of the job done. And I think for internal use cases, if we accept that this is a flawed helper that gets some things done, but not everything, but gives you a head start on some things, then we get the value. If we want things to be absolutely perfect and be like, this silly idea, right, that I can have an AI software engineer, Devin or whatever that product was, and things like
Uh-huh.
that, which I found a little offensive because I'm like, software engineers do much more than coding. But anyway, that's right.
Yes.
But the idea I can describe in natural language a couple things and have it spit out a bunch of code and be done and things like that. It's like that's not how software engineering works. One, there's all kinds of discussions outside, but even the code, you write something, you run it, it's flawed, you rework it and things. And I do believe this tech, if you're a developer using AI as a helper or assistant, it's just accelerating your work, but it's not replacing your work.
Yes, and I would generally agree. I don't disagree with that. Let me put it that way. My concern, and I think the concern of a lot of other people, is that right now, a senior developer would or a senior software engineer would come up with broad concepts, broad design goals, all of that sort of stuff, and hand it off to a junior engineer or a team of junior engineers. And now there's this notion of, hey, we can replace the junior engineer. If a software can do 75, do this work 75% accurately, well, that's about how good a junior engineer is on an average day. So we can get rid of them. The problem is you don't get senior engineers unless you have junior engineers.
100%.
So
100%.
we need that group, and we need to find the right ways to augment that group to with AI tools to help
Uh-huh.
them. Maybe that is helping them understand our code base better. Whether that's providing them guidance about which way to go, about identifying the mistakes that the junior engineers are most likely to make in terms of things like security and the sorts of bugs that you see almost everybody makes at least once, but we learn from that and don't make it again.
Mm-hmm.
How do we help the engineers learn from that? How do we use these for code reviews? So I'm not opposed to AI code assistant, but to me it needs to be an assistant. And
So 100%.
as a senior developer, I don't feel like they're that helpful to me, but that's because I spent decades making mistakes.
So here's where I find them helpful. One, it's read every manual, right? It remembers this. And
Yeah.
so one of the problems I get is I sometimes forget the syntactic sugar for something.
Yes.
I'm like, oh god, I know how to do that stupid thing. Like, but I've just forgotten how to do it, and then I have to go look it up and things. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense and things. And so it helps kind of remember that. Or I know there's a method to do, I don't know, algorithm X, Y, or Z, right? That's not value add. It's been written 1,000 times. I don't remember how to do it, right? I'll go do that. What did I do in the old days? I'd search in the web and do things or things like that. I might go to Stack Overflow and search through the things and decide what was good or bad. Now, if I have an AI, I just think it's a little faster, right? It gets even the
Yes.
manual
Yeah.
results. It gets you the stack with just the same problem as Stack Overflow, right? You go to Stack Overflow, right? And there's 5 answers, and you got to be
You've got to evaluate
sophisticated
which
enough
one is right. Yeah. You can't
exactly
accept it
which one is right.
blindly. Yes.
So it's this really smart thing that sits on your shoulder that also drinks a little heavily sometimes, and or is to want to call kind of you know tall tales and things, but it's super smart and things like that, and it has a knowledge base in it that it can retrieve faster than I can. So I see it as a helper. I also get lazy. Like I what I've used is there's a code base I've written things like that, and I want to add. I was doing something the other day. It was a UI app and things like that. I was Python. I was using Panel, and I'm like, how the I know there's a way to put a button there and things like that, and that's not very interesting to me to put a button, but I couldn't get it right. And I fed it the code and it put the button in and it was right. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like that just made me more productive. And me remembering the exact syntactic sugar of exactly how to put that button there or that and things like that, probably not very valuable. Me thinking about the problem overall and the architecture and how it works together and that is valuable. So I don't
Yes.
know. That's the way I like to
No,
think of
no,
it. But you know, it's I you know what? It's a tool.
it's a tool. Where's my hammer again?
Yeah, exactly. We keep
What
on
once
going back.
again, it's a
It's all about
tool.
hammers, man.
It's hammers all the way down. Any other final thoughts on Unparsed or anything else from there?
I enjoyed the conference. I enjoyed the size of the conference, and it is really good to get a more, admittedly, this is European centric view and things like that, but it is really good to get out of your bubble
Mm,
and go and listen to other people and talk to other people whom you might have seen online or not and things like that. And, I found it really interesting to talk to these people who are running chatbots for Lloyd's Bank, right? Like that's a monstrous bank, right? There's some really good lessons learned in that kind of stuff. So I'd say there. But I found it refreshing that the practitioners that are doing this, not surprisingly, see beyond all the hype and feel and see it as a tool there. And so when you get into the people who are really building this stuff for a living, I feel a little better because I can get a little bit frustrated with the hype level, and I feel it kind of obfuscates the true value. And so it was
Yes.
nice to see practitioners building things who are smart enough to know, yep, it'll do this, but it won't do that. Or if the future is really bright here, but we're not ready to jump to that future. And it might not just be the technology. It could be we as an organization are not ready to take that leap and accept the way that technology works, or that, and that gets in that stochastic output versus deterministic kind of things.
Thank you so much, Roger, for joining us. This has been great, and I hope we have you on again in the future. For those that want to reach out and contact you, what is the best way to do
Oh,
so?
and it's absolutely the best way. Just look up Roger Kibbe. I work for Samsung. If you put, I should just come up, but Roger Kibbe Samsung, I'll come up. And yeah, I've increasingly been doing more and more there, and I think it's a good. It is a flawed, but probably the best social media I find right now for sharing some information and having
So,
conversation.
folks want to reach out to you, leave comments below, reach out to us in social, and we will talk another time. I am quite sure on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs.
Take care, Roger. Have a great week.
You too, Alan. Have an amazing week.